people are looking at more bit-sized learning, micro-learning, and micro degrees.
Organizations have to become great learning organizations.
It's about lifelong learning, career progression, maintaining the employability in a fast-changing job market.
This decade is all about how you apply what you learn.
61% of the working population in the world will need to be reskilled by 2027.
Transforming talent with learning that works. Now, over the past 2 years here at Business Insider India, we've been trying to find out how enterprises and thought leaders are moving the needle of innovation by training their workforce with skills and technologies that are going to make an impact tomorrow. Now, in this edition, where we've partnered with Coursera, I'm joined by industry leaders who are, well, there is no clear path in how they work because they are creating the path as they walk along. And they're going to tell us how they are using upskilling to bolster their enterprise and business. Please join me in welcoming Rajesh Rai, the Vice President for the People team and the Head of HR for India at Global Logic. Hi, Rajesh.
Hello. Hi, Ashwin.
Hi. Joining us from LTI Mindtree is the Chief Human Resource Officer, Manoj Shikarkhane.
Hello, Ashwin. Hello, everyone.
Merlin Matthew joins us from Persistent Systems, where she's the Head of Delivery Excellence and the Talent Supply Chain.
Yeah, Ashwin, thanks for having me on this panel.
Thanks, Merlin. Rajiv Naithani is the Chief People Officer at Infogain. Thanks for joining in, Rajiv.
Thank you, Ashwin. Good to be here.
And we have Arushi Agarwal, the Head for Coursera for Business in India. Hi, Arushi. Welcome back.
Hi, pleasure to be here.
Lovely. It's so good to have quorum and have you all join us here on Business Insider India. The first thing I really want to, pick on is on how have you seen the concept of upskilling itself that has transformed over the last decade, or perhaps from the time you started working? Merlin?
I don't really want to give away from the time I started working. That will give away a lot of things. But I think the industry itself has changed quite a bit over the last, 2.5 decades that I've been around, right? So when I started my career, it was all about more core technologies, programming language, get the job done offshore with minimal exposure to the client's end customers. So that kind of limited the kind of roles that people could, work in. That was 2.5 decades back. But over time, what we see is that there has been a lot of digitization. A lot of the core technologies are not just used by people sitting from ITES service companies, but we are actually co-developing them, right? So for Persistent, we are a product development company and we are at the helm of that. What I also see is that there is a lot of product ownership, client management, and defining the end customer outcomes, which is part of the entire development lifecycle now. So the methodology of training and learning has changed. Also, I think there's been 2 generations which have gone by in the last 2.5 decades, which means that people are looking at more bit-sized learning, micro-learning, and micro degrees, right? So that is a big focus. There's also an element of credibility that organizations like us need to build with our partners, right? So we invest heavily in certifications, which are partner-led certifications, right? That helps us to pretty much work shoulder to shoulder with them. A lot of the old suspects like, the soft skills, the leadership development, those things remain. But I think what is emerging today, Ashwin, is also the need to infuse creative thinking, the ability to question. And some of this is not really covered in our educational system. And that's something that we want to infuse in our learning at Persistent.
And that's a brilliant problem to have. How do you get people to be more creative? We'll crack that at some point of time. Manoj?
Yeah. So look, the talent has always been the backbone of IT industry, okay? And the industry has witnessed so many hype cycles around various technologies in the past. If I go back in the history, the life was so simple. There used to be only couple of technologies, like open system and, some C++, Yeah. But what has happened over a period of years is that technologies kept changing, but the hype cycles continued. And what we have seen in the last few years is that the pace of change of technology has accelerated like never before, okay? And the cycles also have become shorter. Okay, compared to what it used to happen in the earlier days, the hype cycle time of the technology has shortened. Okay, also we are seeing hundreds of cycles getting into action at any given point in time. Okay, earlier it used to be a very linear progression of technology change. Now it's all over. Okay, and this has led to widening of the skill gap between what you need and what you have. Okay, and this has created tremendous pressure on the entire skilling activity. So cross-skilling, upskilling is not just the employee retention technique now. It has become a business necessity these days. Okay. So, in LTI Mindtree, we are also shifting our focus from just a pure formal education degree to checking the learnability of the person, whether the person is able to learn, whether the person is able to solve real life problems. That is becoming the real need of the hour. And I think organizations have to become great learning organizations in order to attract and retain the talent.
I'm not able to gauge. Are you a fan of the hype cycles, or are you somebody who doesn't like the hype cycles?
Look, I don't like the hype cycle. Okay, to tell you very frankly, I don't like, because our technology world, new product, new technology comes in, and then there is so much of hype that gets created. Okay, that you get lost in the hype, and by the time you come to a conclusion that what exactly is this technology all about, the new technology comes in. Okay, so I'm not a fan of the hype cycle.
I'm making it a point to ask you about AI in just a moment, but I'll come back to you.
Sure.
I'm going to pull Rajiv into this discussion. Rajiv?
So, with Marilyn and Manoj setting the tone already on this topic, it's very little left. So let me begin with an analogy, right? Whenever we talk about upskilling, imagine upskilling as an old library book. A decade back or 2 decades back, it was like that book sitting on the shelf, only taken when there was absolutely necessity, dusted off, and then written back to its place. It was mostly and often reactive and afterthought, used mainly to keep up the immediate job requirements or when a particular skill gap became apparent. Now let's fast forward to today. That library today has transformed into something like e-reader, which is constantly updated with the new content. Similarly, upskilling has become proactive, ongoing, and integral to both personal and professional development of the individuals. And of course, as Manoj was rightly mentioning, that it's part of the technology industry, because the tech industry has been evolving as we progressing from time to time perspective. So I think it's no longer just about keeping up with the job requirements, but about staying ahead of them. It's about lifelong learning, career progression, maintaining the employability in a fast changing job market. And if I actually make it more contextual to Infogain, in our case, what we realized over a period of time, and that's where the pivoting which we got into from a learning perspective, was being a software engineering organization evolving to be a digital platform and then human-centered digital platform company. In that journey, we realized that learning development function cannot be a back-end cost center function. It has to become the business enablement function, and the complexity at which we were going with respect to our GTM strategy that required us to actually link our L&D function with the sales force to figure out what we are actually selling, what the skill gap context is, and at what rapid stage we need to really keep evolving and building those skill capabilities inside the organization, because the time to hire, the cost to hire, all that is a big challenge in our kind of industry. And that's where the upskilling has actually become more pull-based for us than the push-based. And I can talk about it later on in case if we need to get into detailing around it. But that's kind of change and transformation I've seen in my organization and in the industry I come from.
Which makes ROI more accountable as yet, which is something that we'll definitely talk about in just a while. Let me pull Rajesh into the discussion. Hey, Rajesh, what are your thoughts around here on how you've seen upskilling itself transform through the decades?
No, so, earlier skilling, upskilling, learning, etc. used to be, I would say, it would run at its own pace, right? For IT sector, it was still central, but I wouldn't say that it was something that people were so madly after. But after the pandemic and after things changed, I would say it became very, very agile on the go, right? And likewise, you're also expected to show the ROI as an individual. I'm not talking about as a company, but as an individual, maybe in your delivery, in your work, or in your NPS scores, whichever way, right? You have to show how well you upskilled yourself. So it's all in the results now, which is very different from what it used to be, say, 2 decades back or even 1 decade back. Second is, when I said agile, it's absolutely, as I said, on the go, ever changing. So if you leave learning for a little brief period of time, it's very possible that you would have either missed a portion of the bus or the whole bus itself sometimes. The third is that unlike maybe the last 2-3 decades, this decade is all about how you apply what you learn. So it's no longer, okay, yeah, we sit in a classroom or maybe have a Zoom call, learn something, and there are miracles that happen after that. It doesn't happen like that. How you apply what you learn on your job is very important, much more important than what is there, say, on your profile or on your CV. So I think these are the three, I call these crucible experiences, which really transform you. There is a little shift I see also, that learning is, true learning, right, is not any longer the nice, seamless kind of happy kind of session that you will have, right? True learning is where you really push yourself to be as effective on the job or on your work as you can be. So these are some of the changes that I see that are there now.
Thanks for that, Rajesh. Arushi, you come from a business that is digital first, but within that span of the last decade where digital has been growing, how have you seen upskilling itself change, and where you have not been exposed to an era where people have to go inside classrooms and be reskilled in new technologies?
Absolutely. And, it was such a pleasure hearing the views that were shared, right? And I was trying to sort of find the thread that we have also seen. We are in the learning space as a company, right? Our endeavor is to be able to be a learning partner to organizations, which my colleagues are representing on the call today. So, the phrase that we have given to the evolution of learning is the following. So we think that learning has moved from open learning to guided learning to skills first learning. So maybe, 5, 6, 10 years back, digital learning was a benefit that was given to the employees. It was an open platform where people would be able to come and, choose what they want to learn, choose the medium in which they want to do this, etc. Then this evolved into more guided learning, where catalogs and collections were created and then shared with the learners or the end employees. And now there is so much more focus on the skills, and primarily because of what everybody has already spoken about, which is the importance of this being very well aligned with the business, as well as the pace at which the changes are happening, right? So that's really what we have seen. And Coursera had the opportunity to partner with the World Economic Forum in the Future of Jobs Report 2023. And, the report says that 61% of the working population in the world will need to be reskilled by 2027. And the top skill that we will need to learn is analytics and critical thinking, right? Like those are the ones which have really moved up. So I think that's really what everybody has been talking about right now, that the iterations are so much faster. We need to keep up with the change. We need to make sure that learning is aligned with the business and it is outcome-based from the learner to the organization.
Outcome-based is the first thing that most people think about. Before we get into the next thing, I quickly want to ask all of you, one of the biggest challenges that employees have when they are trying to upskill or learn something new is that you've already got into a work mindset, and to get back into a part academic or an academic mindset is a huge mountain to surpass. So quick palate cleanser question. How do you keep the mindset to study while working still active? What are some of the life hacks that you use to ensure that you're still in that mold to learn while you still have the work pressures going on? I see Rajiv smiling. Rajiv, you go first, please.
I'm actually a lifelong learner. While even now I'm pursuing my MSc program in People and Organizational Development from University of Sussex, and I've never stopped my studies. Not just because I want to gain a degree or a certification. It helps me enhance my perspective. And I'm a strong believer of 70-20-10. And I believe that the 10% investment which you do on your self-learning by investing your efforts, money, and time, it really paves path for you to enhance 90% impact of it overall in your career. And that has helped me always throughout in my career. So I actually always go for learning. I encourage everybody to actually pay attention to that 10% on self-investment and self-development.
Awesome. Malin?
So I typically learn as I go. So I'm not a very structured learner, Ashwin, but if there is a problem to be solved, I'll look for material, people, experiences, and then try to do some of it, right? So I believe that doing is the best form of learning. And the other bit is teaching. So I typically also try to, and it may not always be in a formal setting, right? But when you try to teach somebody something, somehow the concepts sit much better with you. So those are the two aspects.
Lovely. Manoj?
You know what I do? I keep talking to the millennial generation. And every time I talk to them, I just get amazed with the knowledge that they have. They don't have practical experience, but the kind of knowledge that they bring, it is so amazing. And it becomes a big motivation for me to keep learning while I'm doing my job. Okay, I start thinking that if these kids out of the college, if they know so much, what am I doing here with so many years of experience that I write on my biodata? So
Lovely. Rajesh?
A couple of things. One is definitely, as I said, crucibles, right? Which is experiencing by doing it or getting immersed in that doing. I think there is no better way to, as for me at least, to learn than that. But the second is that the world is changing so fast that to what Manoj said, right? Interactions with a diverse set of leaders, people, employees, and that helps a lot because every person I meet or I'm meeting, right? They'll refer me to say a different website or a book or a audio clip or a video clip or a course also at times, right? So that helps a lot. So I mean, I remember you talking about DEI, and I said, look, there's so much of diversity in learning these days that because of the kind of people we have around us. So it's a gold mine that you can really invest. And of course, the third one is at a regular basis, I do feel that I keep learning. So like the last program that I went through was it was a Hitachi sponsored through INSEAD, right, where they were talking about next gen leadership in these disruptive times. It's always good to learn that way as well because it exposes you to newer concepts coming your way. But one thing is very common. It's all the time. It's not that it's stagnant or 1 week goes without learning something new. It doesn't happen like that. Pretty much week on week, month on month, it's become very regular.
I hope that doesn't happen on your vacations as well. That could be
Books do happen, I think. I think books, I'm sure a lot of us will agree, they possibly still are and those paperback books for me, are still the very, very good companion of reading and getting a lot in return. So on vacations, it's that, but otherwise, no.
Thanks, Rajesh. Arushi, is your flex that you have the most amount of Coursera courses completed in this panel?
Absolutely. And I learned how to learn from, all the views that were shared today. So maybe just to add, I try and do my learning in two aspects. One is the literacy aspect where I would like to be able to hold a conversation with an expert or somebody who's interested in the topic and be able to be a meaningful listener or a contributor. So where do I want to sort of have a broad understanding? And then where do I want to have a deep understanding, which is, related to my role or, the part of the organization that I am. So that's one aspect. And logistically, I am learning on every flight, in every cab. So I look forward to, otherwise I would just get restless if I am in a closed environment. Now I look forward to it because I have my courses downloaded, the one that I want to do. If I need to be on the desk, I look forward to the quiz. When my flight lands and I actually get my score, it's like a thrill. So it's a positive reinforcement I've given to myself from a logistics fashion.
Lovely. Thank you for those quick insights. And I want to come back to what we're really largely talking about. Now, is it the buzzword for the year, or is it the buzzword of the decade, or for the century? I don't know. But AI is pretty much in nearly every conversation that I've had with the industry over the last few months, to be honest. Now, beyond training people in AI, what I'd really like to hear from all of you is that how do you use AI itself to better upskilling? Now, these methods might not exist in a product as such, but if you had to wear a creative thinking hat and you say, okay, here's a technology that's available, which can vastly augment the effectiveness of what I'd like to do with my upskilling. So if you had that option to use AI, how do you see AI itself impacting upskilling, as a field? Malin?
Yeah, so we are actually working on a platform, Ashwin, on this, and I don't want to give away too many details, but
Sure.
one of the things that we need to first understand, and the system needs to learn about the people, right? So let's assume Ashwin has been working for 10 years at Persistent and is a front-end Java developer. Now, over the last 1 year, Ashwin has actually worked on a project which has also helped him write APIs. Now, how do you get this in a mode where I'm not relying on Ashwin or Ashwin's manager to actually go and update this, right? So that is one aspect of it. So do I know the baseline skills of my people? How do I use today's listening tools to go and capture it and put it in some system somewhere? The other is, do I have learning paths in my, say, learning management system, which helps people know, today, as I said, I'm a front-end developer. What are the steps it takes me to get to a full stack developer? And this learning could be two types. One could be your structured learning from partners like Coursera or Udemy, but the other is also the hands-on learning. And I think that's a big change that we're seeing today in the industry, right? Where you have to get the learners to actually do. So once you have, AI finding out what, the base skills of people are, you have another system which tracks the demands. It's about bringing these two things together.
Lovely. Thanks for that, Merlin. Rajiv?
So, as Merlin actually rightly said, number one which comes to my mind is the personalized learning path. So if there is a software engineer who is more visual learner, AI can actually help recommend video tutorials and infographics from a learning perspective. Similarly, if there is a project manager who has learned by doing things, going back with what Rajesh was saying, so the AI can actually suggest more hands-on project-based learning modules. That's one. The second is, we have been talking about gamification. Even in our own context, we're trying to actually build the gamification driven learning journey for our people, which is role-based. And then, there's a learning path for the individuals. And then how do we actually bring more pull for the individuals by leveraging tools like AI and technology to actually make that happen. And third, I believe, even from a L&D functions perspective, there is this entire LMS administration, right? Traditionally, the LMS was meant for tracking. You have so much of manual work to be done. A lot of uploading of data has to happen through API. You're connecting, all the time. There's one dedicated person doing all this job. But I think you can actually automate leveraging AI, your LMS system in a way that it actually frees up the human resources for more strategic roles, in my view. And secondly, it can also give you insights, which would be much more helpful, beneficial to drive some of the interventions, which will also help you manage the decision making in a much better way. So these are some of the things where AI could actually help from a L&D function perspective.
Thanks, Rajiv. Rajesh, if I could pull you in on here.
Thank you. No, yeah, agree. Absolutely. I think the beauty of AI is that you can get a very data-backed suggestion, advice, or a way forward. And which was earlier difficult, although there is a rider there that your data-backed response that you'll get on your future learning needs or present learning needs will depend on how good your backend data is. But I'm assuming that your backend data is absolutely good or decent enough. I think AI can really help employees, which of course we also do, in really getting to know what kind of future learning paths they have, which will apply for their interest areas or their career goals, or how do they wish to really progress. And given that we are talking about a tech population where technology is central, this therefore becomes a very, very important piece, right? Earlier, what used to happen was the paths were manually made and they were pretty much static, right? There is a direction that you usually would take. Let's say if you're a Java engineer, the next is this. But today, AI can suggest varied kind of learning paths for you depending on the interest areas that you have. So that's how as I said, the best part that I appreciate about AI is that it's data backed. It's not just general, general giving away of learning paths. It's actually based on data about that employee and what they may have gone through and what they're looking for. That is a great place to be.
There's this lovely line about data I read about a while back. I don't know who it was. It was attributed to a famous CEO who said that if opinions are all we have, let's go with what I say. If data is what you have, let's go with what you say. So I remember it's one of those things. And it's like, anyway, Manoj?
Yeah. So Ashwin, look, I think the speakers have covered some of the points. I'll just focus on the delta. So there are broadly 4 or 5 use cases that we have identified, and basically, we believe that it's going to transform our entire talent supply chain. Okay. So starting with the creation of automated learning pathways, right? Merlin talked about it, Rajiv talked about it. We have an information overload on one side, and on the other side, we have a specific individual. So how do you create a customized, personalized learning pathway based on the skills that the person has? Okay, is a very straightforward use case. The second use case is on our entire workforce management, okay, where what we try to do is, we try to look at the job description, the skills requirement from our customer, and the skills that we have with the talent that is residing in the company. And this whole matchmaking business, it may sound very simple, but it's very, very complex, very difficult function in the talent supply chain. And this is the area where we are trying to bring AI in so that the matchmaking happens effortlessly. It will not only save the response time and improve the client satisfaction, but it will also help us in the revenue optimization. That's the second case. Third is about, the entire career progression, okay, of individual. So imagine somebody, some analyst wants to progress to a senior analyst role. Now, AI can play a very critical role in not only identifying specific competencies that the individual needs to get, but also what are the proficiencies that this person has to acquire to help her move to, senior analyst role. So that's the third use case, I would say. Fourth is in the entire performance management, okay, exercise. I think, based on the competencies and based on the proficiencies achieved by the individual, okay, a very objective assessment can be done using AI, okay, and this can become a key input in the entire performance management exercise, okay. Many times, we know that it becomes subjective, so AI can bring a lot of objectivity in the entire performance management exercise. The last use case is a bit tactical. We know that in our technology field, many times our people struggle while working on a project. Now, AI can come, handy to them, pointing them to the right resource in our information portal, knowledge portal, based on the challenge that the individual is facing in the specific area in the technology, and help that individual to fix, the issue or overcome the challenge.
Lovely. Thank you for that. Arushi, if I could have you quickly come in now. Beyond teaching people about AI, how are you using AI itself to understand people better?
Absolutely, absolutely. And, such wonderful use cases based on what various companies need. So if I were, like you said, right, if I don't talk about the teaching of the AI, but looking at how AI can help deliver better on our platform, we have looked at this from 2 perspectives. The first thing that we have done is our end customers, which are the organizations, and the customers of the organizations, which are the learners, right? So how can we make it personalized and effective for both of these? And I'll give you the example. We have productized this. What we are calling this is Coursera Coach. So this is for the learner. And I think, we heard the point right now around making sure the data for the suggestions is effective. So this is the data of our 200,000 clips and 10,000 courses, along with the learning that the learner has done on the platform and powered by GPT, etc., which is able to become almost, in the words, it become a coach for this learner, where they can ask questions from as simple as, can you summarize module 1 for me, to what should be the next course I do based on my learning path and my aspiration to become ABC, to I am stuck in this concept, can you help me understand this better? So the environment is the environment that we have, and the context is the learner context. So this is Coursera Coach. The other thing that we have done for the organizations is we are coming up with a product called assisted authoring, AI assisted authoring, or course builder, where what we're saying is that not every company will require a course or a lesson or a clip to be in a standard format. So why don't we give autonomy to the organization to pick and choose from the hundreds and thousands of hours of learning, be able to create quizzes and assessments using AI, and create a very personalized course for the cohorts of learners. So that is what we are trying to do, which is take all the good stuff which is there, use AI to build on top of it, and then serve the learners as well as the organizations.
Rajesh?
Yeah, as Arushi was speaking, I was just thinking that, AI will give us very predictive inputs. They are no longer reactive inputs on what you need to do. It's about very proactive, predictive learning inputs that will come our way. They are already coming our way, actually, right? So that's one thing. And second thing is, I'm very sure that AI is going to, it's already started to, but it will up the threshold of learning as well, right? No longer the basics can be taught maybe very easily using generative AI, especially, and maybe the more difficult, the more complex stuff would be left to courses, because the rest of it can be taught by generative AI itself, right? So maybe those are the other two trends I see happening. They've already started to happen, but going forward, possibly this is what will happen as well.
What would you expect from AI-led products that enhance upskilling, Rajesh?
Well, I mean, again, so as I said, it's about, I'm hoping that it will be more experiential and more interactive. See, learning traditionally has been very one-sided, two-dimensional kind of learning. Okay, you do something, then you do assessment, and then maybe go back to it. It's been a bit of a stepwise, step 1, 2, 3 kind of a process. I would possibly, a generative AI or AI in general has that capability of making it very interactive, as if you're literally learning from another human, provided it's intelligently done. And there's a lot of trash there as well. But if that happens, right, then imagine the possibilities of learning some very complex things through AI, just like you would learn from a human, right? Where it's like somebody teaching you, right? And you're responding there and there itself, rather than waiting for the whole thing to get over and then having an assessment done. That's one. Second is, it also tells you about the effectiveness of your learning as you go along. So it's not that at the end of the course you get to know it. You get to know as you learn. So maybe these two things is what I'm sure, Arushi would have a lot more to share around this, but that's what I see as a good, apart from the fact that it should suggest, depending on its own intelligence, what are the various learning paths that can get curated from time to time. So it's agile enough to suggest those. Apart from that expectation, these are the two that I would really have.
I'm just going to go on a hack out here and just, when we've been speaking to your peers in the past, one of the problems that they have told us is that when it comes to upskilling, the dropout rate sometimes is significant, which is in the sense that in terms of the time and efforts that has been invested in trying to, upskill this individual, it's just gone down the drain. How viable is it to be able to use AI to predict even before we start a course with an individual that, okay, the probability of this individual completing it is suspect, so we're better off not investing the time, effort, and resources? Is it realistically possible to be able to build on and increase your ROI that way?
See, the ROI is not just about, getting learners to finish a course, right? It is actually to build their knowledge and to ensure that that knowledge is used, in the interest of the project, in the interest of the end client, right? So I think it's a very tricky mechanism to actually say that if somebody finishes the course, he or she has learned it.
Mhm.
I think just picking off a leaf from what Rajesh was saying, right? If AI is able to keep the learner engaged and give him or her the course which helps build on her knowledge and curiosity, that is what will get people to stay and finish a course. The ROI will come when you're able to deploy these people. You will actually see outcomes in terms of you being able to deliver better quality code to your customers at a faster rate, right? So I don't know whether, holding back a learner is really the right metric.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for that perspective. I see Arushi nodding.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think couldn't say it better than it's already been shared. So neither is completion a mark of having learned, nor is non-completion a mark of not having learned, right? So I think, and the other thing that we have noticed is a learner doesn't start from point zero in an organization. They may well already be at 20, 30, 40. So often what happens is you're teaching them something they know, they tend to get bored and then they drop off, right? So in addition to what Malin has shared, one other thing that we try and do is we administer a pre-examination that we call a level set. We say your level is already at 20, your organization expects you to reach 50. So we will recommend courses through AI that are already starting at the intermediate level. You don't have to do the beginner level. So that is how we also support and are respectful of the time of the learner to make sure the organization benefit comes in.
Lovely. I want to talk about the culture, but before that, one quick palate cleanser. Now, I'd like to understand what is that one skill that you have learned which has been hugely transformational in your own learning journey? Some of the answers we have received in the past are responses like, I learned about the Pomodoro timer where I work in batches of 25 minutes. We had one of your peers who told us that I don't believe in multitasking. I just believe in doing one thing at a time. And that has made me, be able to accomplish a lot more. So what is that one learning/skill which you think has been indispensable in your, learning trajectory, personal learning trajectory? Manoj?
I would say one book that I read, Ashwin, it's a Joys of Compounding by Gautam Baig. And, the first few chapters in that book, Gautam talks about the importance of learning and the learnability, okay? And I felt it so apt. And, he's given some techniques to improve your learnability, okay? And I was, I practice whatever that I've learned by reading that book. I practice it every day. And it has helped me to transform. It has helped me to improve my own learnability.
Well, the magic of compounding. Well, Raju?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, in my case, there are three, if I were to, without going in any order, talk about. The one is, once I heard Dalai Lama said, I do not know, is the biggest starting point of learning. So that has given me a lot of perspective of going beyond the chair and position to learn from even the junior most in the team. That's one. Second is the adaptability. Moving through different organizations, different contexts, leaders, working with different diversified leaders and stakeholders. That adaptability to changing context has really helped me learn to be better individual, professional, and human being. And the third one, which came from my spiritual journey, that's resilience. And actually, I think that has given me a lot of peace and calmness in my life from a learning perspective. So these are the three.
Well, thanks for that, Rajiv. Rajesh?
I don't know if I can name one because, as I said, it's so continuous that it just happens every month, every quarter. I can possibly just quote a lot of my own favorites, right? Like what got you here won't get you there. That's one of my all-time favorites. My recent one was Atomic Habits. I read it during my Accenture time as well. I reread it as well. How do you build new habits and then sustain them? Atomic Habits is extremely great on that. Once I read on storytelling, which I loved. It's called The Weekend Language, right? Which really tells you how do you communicate without getting too technical so that whoever you're speaking to really understands it like a story rather than a technical phrase. So, and I can just go on and on. Would I possibly have a list of at least 50 to quote at any given point of time? It's just, I think, the times that we are in, that where pretty much I come across a new subject or some interesting subject because times are so disruptive every week to 10 days. Sometimes it's about bold leadership in these times. What does it really mean? Sometimes it's about, as Rajiv said, resilience and decoding ambiguity in these times. So I think it's just a very continuous process. I can go on and on, but there is a lot to share on this question.
No, but great two recommendations that you started off with those two books as well. So, Malin, tell us a skill that has helped you. Yeah.
What keeps me learning is, I think, my innate sense of curiosity, right? I'm like, super curious about everything. And what that has led to, Ashwin, is actually me playing a lot of roles in my career trajectory, right? So I started as a developer, ran large accounts, went into consulting, went back into captive, did a lot of work around tooling, and now I'm doing a people role, right? So if I look at, the last 2.5 decades, it's been a new role all the time, and it's very exciting. And, a little bit of, as somebody said, I do not know everything, and hence I must ask, and I must learn. Right, I must learn and then perform on the job. So I think it's the curiosity and the ability to change roles, and I think the change of role is because of the curiosity. So it somehow goes hand in hand.
I'd love to sometime ask you a question as to how do you, when you're in an interview and you've showed a CV that has 8 different skills, doesn't that confuse the other person? But then different question for different day. But Arushi?
Well, we have to become multi-skilled now. And I think that's the other part of learning that we all need to focus on, right? Because, there is research to say that there are going to be a lot of S-curves in people's careers and lives. And then, to be able to go through these S-curves requires you to keep an open mind and keep learning, right? Yes. And it's always that you build on the previous role. You never leave what you know. So I think it's because of my previous roles in delivery that I can look at digitization, aspects so cleanly over here. So it's you keep building on what you know. You never forget what you know, and you learn to apply it.
And it's interesting you say this because, in the world of art and cinema, people like you who are multi-talented often bring in some of the most interesting changes by cross-pollinating trends which would have not been a part of your main body of work. So that's when your newer influences come in from domains which are not directly connected to what has been the primary study. So thanks for that, Malin. Very, very, very interesting perspective. Arushi, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one skill which I feel has been important, but underrated before I did it, was the ability to listen and absorb. Often what happens is that people are listening to respond, not listening to absorb and be able to take something new. So I think being able to do that and then apply it in whatever context comes forth in the next day, in the next week, in the next month. So I think that really helps me retain anything I learn. So active listening, or, let's say like active reading, just absorbing what comes in our day-to-day and comes in our learning. I think that has really, been one highlight for me.
Lovely. Thank you for that. And I'm going to come back to our last theme for the day. And that's something that Merlin touched upon very, very shortly a little while back. And that is ROI. How do you measure that upskilling is fundamentally working? And what are some of the tangible and the intangible feel factors that you use to be able to gauge any of this? Merlin, I know you started on this a while back. You want to add into what you said and perhaps give us a few more dimensions on the tangible, intangible? Yeah.
So some of the things that we look at are things like, are our people getting certified? Interestingly, for a company our size, we have the highest per capita certifications across hyperscalers, right? We give these goals not just to individuals, but also to the leaders, because you have to make the time available to people to learn. You have to have those avenues available to learn, right? So it's a leader goal. It's also a people goal. We look at how much of our fulfillment is actually led through skilling. So that's a metric that we measure, right? And some of the intangibles, I think we've made a huge impact with our customers, right? So we've seen a 25% increase in our NPS year on year. Those are the intangible ones, right? So I think more than the hard ROI of, I've spent X million dollars and, Y percentage of my people are learning about Z days is what we deliver to our clients, right? I also see that the number of escalations coming down with the right levels of learning going. So I think, those are the kind of things which you may not directly correlate as a learning metric, but that's definitely a good learning outcome.
Lovely. Thank you for that, Merlin. Rajesh?
I agree with Merlin. I think the proof lies in the taste of that pudding, right, rather than making it. And in our kind of work, that proof of the taste comes in very, very soon, almost instantly, right? So the minute you deploy an employee to a project, how well they've learned and how well they are applying what they have learned, you can get through feedback almost instantly, right? So, so whether it is the customer NPS or the customer recognition or the appreciation, or as Merlin said, the number of escalations coming down, or whether it is the recognition score of that individual going up, all of these are, I would say, these are measures that yes, it's working, right? Yeah, there are other basics like, okay, we did the assessment, the person passed with X% score, or number of hours invested, or the dollars invested. I think those are fairly hygiene. It's about what you delivered eventually after you learned. And that is why, to my first point, saying today's learning is by doing. It's not necessarily just by reading, or a course virtually that you do, or a workshop that you do. When truly you've gone ahead and really tried and tested and pushed yourself really well and hard on what you learned, that's when all of this proof comes out, right? And it's instant. So in that sense, performance management is also, I would say, connected to the ROI that we measure, right? For example, in matrices like succession, or matrices like, say, your promotions that you do, because all of that is performance and potential based. It's very closely linked to how people have been panning out on the learning side. So these are, I would say, all the ways in which we. The only thing that I would say is that all of these matrices are not there in a typical like dashboard anywhere. You have to create these, but there is enough and more to show that there is a correlation.
Lovely. Thank you for that, Rajesh. Manoj?
So, Ashwin, we make use of three indicators, three KPIs, I would say. First is the ratio of internal fulfillment versus the external hiring that we have to do. And I think Merlin touched upon that. Rajesh also touched upon that. Okay, this is a KPI for some of the leaders in the organization. So we are so serious about it and we track it, okay, very, very carefully. Second is, I think Rajesh touched upon that, the time that individual takes to become productive in a project, okay. So that is a good leading indicator on the kind of reskilling that has happened with him or her. And the third is the attrition, and mainly the reason for attrition. So more of a lagging indicator, but still it is very important, okay. How many people are leaving the organization because they couldn't get opportunities to reskill? They couldn't get opportunities to work on the projects of their choice, okay. And it's a very, very important indicator. So these are three broad objective, KPIs that we measure.
Sorry, I'll just add to that. I think one of the biggest in the tech population, especially, is also the engagement scores, because I feel a large part of how, say, somebody who values technology, or value their engagement to a company is dependent on how much they are learning the newer space of technology, because that's the kind of circles they are in, right? Your teams, your friends, your co-workers, everybody that they're pretty much touching is talking technology, and they're all talking newer things that are coming every week, literally. So have you left behind? Are you behind, or are you ahead of the curve? Is a constant question on their minds. So I would even touch, scores on engagement. They have a very, very big correlation to the learning that employees do.
Great.
Well, thanks for that, Rajesh. Arushi, I presume tracking engagement should be the easiest part of, the upskilling from your end, shouldn't it be?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we like to call these the traditional metrics, which is the learning hours and the course completion, etc., which, would be, I would say, more sort of hygiene. And then in order to actually prove ROI. So, for example, Manoj and Merlin gave beautiful examples of how this can actually be tied to the business, right? So internal fulfillment is all about both not having hiring cost, as well as making sure your pyramid is corrected, as well as making sure the employees are engaged, right? So many things covered with this. What we try to do is we first try to understand what is important from a business outcome perspective, given the various industries we work in. So for example, today, we're talking about tech services. If we talk about professional services, where their role is, let's say, digital transformation for their end customers. One of our customers, they have created 650 micro assets from things like, filling timesheets automatically through these assets to others. And how do you actually save costs? Then there are some other traditional manufacturing companies where people in field roles, so like sales roles, have actually come into IT and digital roles because of upskilling opportunities provided within the organization. So we try and understand what is important to the organization, because all business outcomes are not the same, and then be able to partner on those from a from-to perspective. So that is our endeavor of walking the talk with our partners.
Thanks for that, Arushi. Rajiv?
So, I think most of it is already covered, but I'll make it more contextual to how do we look at this in our context. So one is we have a laser focus on net add thing. So we look at what is our, supply and the demand for the next 90 days in particular. And that actually brings in L&D to its entire context in much more closely knitted way. So we look at in terms of, to the point of Manoj, redeployment from our available bench perspective through reskilling and upskilling of the people who are sitting there, and then catering to the demand as number one. The second is also, irrespective of whether the person is on the bench or not, the internal mobility, right? The rotation, which is a very essential part for us to actually, and putting them into this intervention of upskilling or reskilling. That's one. Number two is, as Merlin was talking about, the number of certification, we track it as part of a KPI, right? It's actually looked at as the target number based thing for us from a business standpoint. The third important thing is, as I initially mentioned, that we have a linkage of our L&D efforts from a skill gap alignment perspective with our SFDC with respect to GTM strategy. So we actually look at what is the overall skill gap within the organization from that perspective? What initiatives do we need to commit ourselves into leveraging practice organization to build the internal capabilities, etc. If I go beyond these business aspects and look at only from a people metrics perspective, then there are two. One is people who have gone through the upskilling and they have been redeployed. What is the iteration from that population segment, right? So going back to your original question, does it make sense to actually, if you have predictability from AI in terms of whether people will stay or not, and you still actually go ahead with that, at least you get what's happening. It's better to invest, but still you're monitoring what's happening thereafter. And to the point which Rajesh was talking about, we actually do a great place to work a diagnostic study every year. So that actually gives us how people are reflecting on the learning experience in the organization. And then we also have an internal support function survey. We call it People Support Experience Survey, which has L&D as one of the enabler function in that. And people do actually give us feedback in terms of how do they see the overall contribution and enablement from that function perspective. So these are some of the matrices which we actually track in Infogain context.
Fairly comprehensive as well. Thank you for that, Rajiv. Now, I've almost come to the end of our the time that I've blocked on your calendar. I have one last time for a quick palate cleanser. Now, standing on the shoulders of giants, now I have a theory that we are all standing on the shoulders of somebody else who put us up there and helped us with our careers. So if I could quickly have you tell us perhaps about the people or the person who helped you transform and succeed in your career, and what is that one little thing that they did, so that we can understand as to what was the pivotal moment in your career that somebody influenced and helped you be where you are today. Manoj?
Many people have played that role in my career. My peers, my managers, some of my managers, my team members. But if I have to call out one person, it's my hiring manager in erstwhile LTI. His name is RVS Mani. He taught me how to build the organization.
Lovely. Thank you for that, Manoj. Rajesh?
I don't know if I can name one, because there have been so many mentors that I've had, and each one of them has helped me grow and pick up so much that it's hard to pinpoint one. I can just give one illustrative name. You would know possibly, he's Mr. N.S. Rajan. He was earlier with EY for a very long time, and then under Mistri's team with the Tatas, and then with IDBI and many other places. And I still remember that when we used to be, I was in consulting at that time, and when we used to be working together, right? His eye for detail, yet being at a very high level, right, to craft the story. And I was fairly young at that time, and I remember that piece was so rewarding. Again, he's just one of those mentors I cherish in my life. There are many more I can name who sort of helped me reach where I am, and I'm like truly grateful for them for what they did to my learning. Seriously.
Thanks, Rajesh. Rajiv?
So, similar to Rajesh's and Manoj's perspective, that there's so many, I still have two of my best teachers to whom I always call on Teachers' Day and, thank them for shaping me, who I became over a period of time, to my hiring manager in HCL, to my bosses in different companies. But one person who stands out is my then manager who had hired me in Global Logic. So Rajesh, it is way back in 2007 when I joined. So Iti Kumar used to be the HR leader for us. And she is somebody who actually inspired me to become a better human being in a professional space, right? So the kind of empathy, the groundedness, despite of having a lot of knowledge, perspective, the way she would conduct herself with people, that actually shaped me very differently. And that gave me a very different perspective of how can you actually be a genuine human being and still make a difference in the organization context perspective. So she stands out among everybody.
Lovely. Arushi?
Yeah, and thank you for asking this question. Gives me an excuse to call my mentor today. So, this was a person who I used to report to, and then, she's my informal mentor still. And I think the thing that stuck with me is sometimes she would tell me observations about myself that I had no idea about, right? And many of those, we're all individuals who are just in the execution mode. And she would say, this is something that you're doing really well, keep doing this. And this is something that you could do better. So, the insight that she would bring, it would just be like, how do I not know this about my own self, So the way she would give feedback, I think it's just fantastic. And is really somebody who I know can, who I can go to for any advice.
Thanks for that, Arushi. And Merlin, closing notes from you.
Yeah, so interestingly, I've had a lot of sponsors through my career, a lot of sounding boards, right? But the one person who really pushed me hard was a client way back in 2007. And he was a very, very tough client. And I learned a lot in that stint of about 3 years with that client. Later on, he went on to hire me. So I used to report to him. And that was an inflection moment because, I knew that this was a person who's not very easy to work with, but I went on to work with him. So those, the 5 years I worked under him and the 3 years that he was my client, he's influenced me in a number of ways. The other person who really has helped me keep my professional and personal life together is my mother. So she was a school teacher, but she's never stepped into corporate, but her ability to gauge, what people are and give me those bits of insights have been invaluable through the last 25 years.
What lovely stories. In fact, the next discussion I have with your peers, I'm going to start with this question because I think it provides a lovely foundation for the entire discussion to proceed. But thank you, Merlin. And in fact, thank you all. Rajesh, Manoj, Rajiv, Arushi, Merlin, it's been a delight to have you join us here on Business Insider India to talk to us about how you're thinking professionally and sharing little bits and pieces about you and your personal life, which adds so much color to your work, to the people that you are, and effectively helping us understand how you are thinking about upskilling. On that note, it's been great having you, and I look forward to having you back with us on BI in the future. Have a great day, and thank you so much again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashwin.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.